started on that. Okay, it looks like we're recording that part. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I'm coordinating the meeting, but the meeting's more about you all and what you have to share. And so I'm Josh Metz with Regional Government Services, and we're providing technical assistance to the Redwood Region RISE in the Economic Development Finance Working Group. And I maybe just go around the screen and see Sarah on my right.
Hi, I'm Sarah Barber. I'm with Euroc Economic Development Corporation and the Alliance CDFI in Klamath.
Thank you for being here, Sarah. Susan.
Susan Seaman, AEDC.
Vivina.
You said it right.
Get there.
It's a tough one. Hi, my name is Vivina Orchid. I am a Hoopa Yurok Creek descendant, enrolled and former tribal leader for the Hoopa Valley Tribe, but I work for the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, and I work on the Tribal Jobs First project and tribal set-aside funding also.
A great resource to have up in the North State, especially. And I have shared a number of the notices that you've sent out with other folks. I'm sure most of you get those, but at least that's one good resource that the state's offering at the moment. Robert.
Robert Gernert, Executive Director with EDFC here in Mendocino Lake in Sonoma County.
And Stacy following that.
Stacy Pecco with EDFC.
Layla.
Hello, Layla Roberts with the Humboldt Area Foundation, Wild Rivers Community Foundation, coming to you from unceded Wiyot.
And Jason Ramos.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Jason Ramos. I'm the tribal administrator and I'm a tribal council member here at the Blue Lake Rancheria.
Thank you for being here. Ross Welch.
Ross Welch, popular executive director at AEDC.
Popular, very
I just put
popular.
that in there to see if anyone would crack a smile. It's a tough crowd. We'll see when I present.
And there's Tracy.
Hi, Tracy Taylor, Finance Director at AEDC, even more popular.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have to see. You can see who's most popular. And then Abigail. She may be, okay, there you go.
Thank you. I'm on the RGS team, hoping to facilitate the meetings, and we'll be following up with any materials and updates on what's next for the group. So thank you for bearing with all the email correspondence you probably see from me.
Thank you, Abigail.
Sure.
Okay, so we have done that part. Thank you for doing that. Let me just do this part for the video recording, which is to say we are here in this meeting, and today's expert session, which is additional to our regular working group meetings happening on the intervening Wednesdays, 3:30 to 5 p.m. Every 2 weeks in between our regular meetings. Today's session is on tribal funding considerations, and one of the things that we learned early on in bringing this working group together, as we were talking about things such as tax increment financing and other funding and financing mechanisms that are available to cities, counties, special districts, that in fact the tribal nations don't have access to those same tools through the state and are facing a number of other challenges and some opportunities for funding and financing. And so this session is really intended to focus on what those opportunities and challenges might be from the standpoint of you all, the practitioners in doing this critical work. And hopefully out of this will yield some ways that the Redwood Rise process and the people involved in the collaboration can find more ways to collaborate and be supportive and working with tribes to realize some of these dreamed of economic development outcomes. So really appreciate you making time in your day to be here. And this is the agenda for today. The folks who've introduced themselves already. And the top line is the opening for Susan as the sitting Economic Development Finance Working Group Chair to say welcome.
So thank you guys for coming today. I recognize it's a smaller group. But the reason we make these videos, in case you don't know, is that we're putting together a library of tools for folks to use. And just to kind of give you an idea of, I was just calling it the Redwood Region Rise universe. It's gotten so big, like solar systems and everything else. We have an equity table, a tribal table. We have 4 different sector tables, and all of these folks are talking about different parts of Redwood Region Rise and how we're going to bring economic growth to our community, both through partnerships and looking at policies and then also having access to funding from the state. And so we feel like the money from the state, which is very generous, is still not going to be nearly enough to do everything we want to do. So we brought together a team of finance experts who have a variety of different experiences. And some of them are from governments that have infrastructure grant experience. Some of them are funders like us. And then when we all get together, we can look at a problem. And if it doesn't come from Redwood Region Rise or from the California Jobs First funding, we will be able to hopefully figure out other ways to fund it. And so I'm really happy to be here today with the panelists that we chose. Both of them and the very popular Ross Welch. Very talented, very broad scope of experience in funding things. Plus, I just like them, so I like to be in the same room with them. So we will get to hear from UROC Economic Development Corporation, Blue Lake Rancheria, which is really exciting for us because they have so much experience in sort of larger infrastructure projects. And then our own Ross Welch, who has become quite knowledgeable in funding tribal programs. So with that, I will, do you want me to invite Sarah to just start with her presentation, Josh?
Yes.
So Sarah, I will just go ahead and have you begin.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So let me move some windows around here so I can see my notes. Okay, so my name is Sarah Barber. I'm the Deputy Director of UROC Economic Development Corporation. During my first few months at YEDC, I was tasked with reorganizing the UROC Tribe's CDFI. I did not know what a CDFI was, and I was a little too embarrassed to ask, so I just started researching on my own. For those not familiar, a CDFI is a community development financial institution which helps promote access to capital and local economic growth in urban and rural low-income communities. Today, I'm going to share the journey of the Alliance CDFI, how it's helping our local community, and how we're partnering with other tribal entities to complete and fund larger projects. Before I jump into the CDFI's journey, it's important to review some of the unique barriers that tribal organizations and communities must overcome. I could have easily created a list simply naming the challenges that tribal communities have with access to capital, but it really wouldn't make sense if we didn't first discuss what created these barriers and what's caused them to remain. We need to go back to acknowledge the past that created our current reality. At the time of settlers, tribal nations were forced from their lands, stripped of their culture, and prevented from speaking their language. These horrific acts resulted in historical trauma, which is very real and present today in tribal communities. Displaced to lands unsatisfactory for agriculture, self-sufficiency became a thing of the past. Native communities were at the mercy of government programs, left in rural, undeveloped areas, far from markets and everyday necessities. Many tribal nations are considered food deserts, having severe food insecurities, which has led to unhealthy lifestyles, far from the diets they once had, consisting of foods rich in harvests that their cultures thrived on. Extending from this, generations of federal policies undermine the recognition and sovereignty of tribal nations, which left communities without federal support, including financial services that were otherwise easily accessed by most communities. Statistically, tribal citizens travel 3 to 4 times further to access basic services compared to non-tribal citizens. Due to rural locations and limited access to services, tribal nations are not afforded the same opportunities in business creation and home ownership because their communities simply lack the necessary infrastructure. Home ownership and business development are key aspects to wealth building opportunities that are not readily available to tribal nations. Lack of credit and access to capital has forced tribal citizens to rely on high-cost lending services to meet their credit needs. Predatory lending has a detrimental effect on a person's credit. With poor or no credit, it's impossible to purchase land or a home. Having negative credit history can prevent borrowers from being able to qualify for low-cost lending opportunities in the future, and so the cycle continues. Oops, went too far. So the Alliance CDFI is a nonprofit organization that was started by the Yurok tribe in the early 2000s. YEDC was tasked with overseeing the Alliance in 2018 when we reorganized, recertified, and reestablished our mission and purpose to help the Alliance reach its full potential as a native CDFI. Native CDFIs were specifically created to provide access to financial resources to some of the most underbanked and unserved communities across the nation. Tribal communities lack telecommunication infrastructure, access to affordable financial products and services, and limited workforce development strategies that tribal entrepreneurs face and must overcome to be successful in their local economies. Native CDFIs have been working to create new solutions to overcome these barriers. We have entered a market that's traditionally seen as very high risk and have helped create small business development, jobs, and improve credit for dozens of tribal citizens. Our programs are designed to build financial assets to provide access to economic opportunities that otherwise wouldn't exist. So our mission at the Alliance CDFI is to promote economic and financial assistance, small business development, and build assets within the Yurok tribal jurisdiction among tribal members, improving the quality of life for its people and communities. We currently offer personal lending and small business lending. This is kind of a breakdown of the lending that we've been doing since 2018 when we reorganized and got back up and running. And then I was just going to kind of go over the funding sources, like the things that we are able to access as a native CDFI, how those have been used with our programs. So we'll just kind of go over some of those. Before we were certified, we couldn't apply for certain funding. So while we were going through that certification process, the Yurok Tribal Council voted and approved to supply us with some startup capital to start lending to people immediately. So we started with some micro lending. We used some of that funding for administrative costs and program development. That was in the amount of $240,000. We did end up using all of that for lending purposes. My position was fully supported by YEDC, so our operational costs were fairly low. The next big pot of money we received was during 2020. Tribal Council decided to dedicate $2,100,000 to a grant program for our small business owners that were tribal members that were suffering due to the pandemic. We developed a program in a matter of weeks. We processed over 240 applications and we were able to fund 198 small business owners. That was anyone from, you know, the jewelry maker that was kind of a side hustle to, we had some tribal members across the nation that had full-on corporations that had a major loss in revenue. We were able to provide grants for. 100,000 of that was earmarked for us for operations to help us deploy that money and make that program work. That was a crazy time. I know all of us remember how crazy that was, but developing a program without a staff and getting that money out the door was really important. We made it happen. We also received a small grant from California Endowment that was also during COVID, $40,000. We were able to do was kind of a rent protection program for small business owners that had a brick and mortar business. So we were able to utilize that as well for our small business owners.
Sarah, can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Just on the engagement with the California Endowment, that came about because of the pandemic, or do you have ongoing relations with them for, because it seems like they should be a source of more funding than that.
That one, it was kind of interesting. I kind of knew, I think she was the executive director at the time, Geneva Wiki. She just knew that we had reorganized our CDFI and saw that we were doing grants for small businesses. She reached out and said, hey, this, you know, the application is minimal. I know you'll get it if you can dedicate it to small business owners. So we just went after it and did that. But no, we haven't had much of a partnership after that with them. Not for any particular reason. We just haven't had a lot of partnership with them.
Okay, thank you.
We have had a pretty good partnership with RCAC, the Rural Communities Assistance Corporation. They came after us, let us know about this opportunity. They asked us to apply. Majority of the funding was them providing services to us. So although it wasn't like a huge monetary gain, they built a curriculum for us. They came here, they did an in-person training. It was a 6-week program for startup businesses or people that were wanting to expand their small businesses. In addition to the services they provided, they did give us a $15,000 grant that we were able to use for outreach personnel and a few other operational costs. We also went after the rapid response program that was under CDFI funding. We received $200,000 for that. 170 went directly to lending to small businesses and 30,000 were for operations. We received a small grant from NCN. I just attended a few seminars, and if I attended all of them, we got $4,000. So a lot of, as you can see, a lot of our funding is just going after any opportunity that comes our way that's in a grant form that we can use that will serve our community. That's how we've been trudging along. And then our most recent, we did receive the CDFI Technical Assistance Grant Award that back in, I think it was 2022. That was, the total was 150,000. We've received the first batch of 75,000. All of that gets used for operations and program development. And then the State Small Business Credit Initiative, the Yurok Tribe listed the Alliance CDFI as the applicant and facilitator for those funds. So we did receive that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, YEDC does support my position. I'm the interim executive director. So, and then they provide office space and we are allowed to use some of the fiscal staff part-time for our bookkeeping and accounting. So let's see if I wanted to hit on anything else there. So all the funding sources I just reviewed total $3,088,979. The funds are to be used in one of 4 general ways: grants, operations, state small business credit initiative, and general lending. The number associated with loans is actually quite higher than it's indicated on this slide. We've closed 651,000 in lending, but have only received 410,000 in order to do so. And this is why we lend. So every time I do a presentation to tribal council or membership, the question I get a lot of time is, why aren't you giving it in grants? Why can't we have this benefit? We can assist so many more people if we're lending. So the fact that it comes back and we're able to help more business owners get more people out of debt, that's what we want to do. And that's the only way that we'll continue to exist. Those same dollars continue to provide assistance to an exponential number of clients over the years. The collected interest on those loans also allows us to expand programs and apply for more funding, which will provide services to more community members over the years. So funding that has been awarded, but we haven't received it yet. The other half of our technical assistance grant for CDFI, the other 2 tranches of our state small business credit initiative grant. So we have another close to $1 million coming in for us. We just have to spend down those first pots before we can draw that down. And then some potential funding, technical assistance for the state small business credit initiative. I have put in that application. I'm anticipating their award announcements probably within the next month. This Cal IIP, I'm forgetting the name of that. I should have put the whole thing in there. The 200,000, we actually did receive that, and the money is in the bank now since I made this slide. So that's good news. And then the Native CDFI network, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, so we have the potential to access, it was 11 million, but they ended up receiving, I think, about half of what their original grant proposal was. So now we have access to probably closer to 4 million if we're able to facilitate those clean energy projects. So moving on. So State Small Business Credit Initiative has probably been the biggest project that we've been working on at the Alliance CDFI. So that is a loan participation program that we built under our application for that funding. We did 2 different programs. One is for very small businesses, that's up to 10 employees. And then commercial lending, which would be for larger corporations. Our target is obviously tribal corporations, and that's up to 500 employees. The match is 50% or more with private funds. The funding program has a life cycle of 7 years, and then after the program requirements, the funding will stay with the Alliance CDFI. So that will enable us to continue to provide lending opportunities and technical support to our community for a long time after. So this has been a really big deal. We're having a little trouble getting it off the ground. We're really close. We do have that first tranche in the bank. So once the final details are sorted out, we can start getting that money out the door. So combining funding opportunities. So this is kind of where my YEDC role and the Alliance CDFI fields kind of merge. Challenges that we have with programs, and one of the larger projects that we're working on right now, I'm sure you guys have seen in the news that we have purchased the Shoreline Fuel Mart, and we received a little over $6 million from EDA to totally rebuild that facility. So our challenges in that process, we're meeting EDA requirements for job creation. And that's kind of one of those things in Indian country. We're so rural. And so they couldn't get over this. Well, you're only creating 11 to 15 jobs. Like, that's a drop in the bucket to EDA. But to us and to our community, that's huge. And especially for a community like Oric, when you're looking at food desert, food insecurities, and we're going to build a facility that can provide hot foods, grocery items, staples, fresh foods, in that community and they don't have to drive that far. It was more about being a community hub than providing jobs. And we really had to kind of work with EDA on our application and build those important things into the app to make them realize what we were trying to do. And then staying on course with the project that meets the needs of the Yurok tribe. They were also trying to get us to alter, because we were trying to create this community hub and this space that meets a lot of the needs that the tribe has and its rural location. We have a second story built on that project. EDA refused to fund that. They saw it as, you know, rental retail space that they imagined we would be leasing to the tribe for, you know, $1. And so they didn't see it as an economic development opportunity. So that was kind of a struggle. We didn't want to limit our project though. And we knew that in the long run, if we wanted to add on after the grant and the project was done, it was going to cost us more money in the long run. And we knew that was space we needed. So sticking to our guns was definitely a challenge, and it did pay off in the long run. And then finally completing a funding package for a project that meets the needs for a for-profit entity while providing services to underserved communities with food insecurities, which is governed by a sovereign nation on land that is off reservation. I mean, when you look at all the different components to that project and trying to get it to fit into one application was challenging, and it was a very long process. So our solutions, we put together a grant application that identified community needs and benefits as well as the corporations. We were able to find private funding to cover the cost of the project that is not funded by EDA. So that's the second story portion of our project. We do plan on pairing that with SSBCI funding as well. And then working closely with various agencies to meet the needs of the community while finalizing details of the project. We're still working through some of those nuances. We're dealing with Humboldt County, we're dealing with BIA, we're dealing with tribal government. It's just all very interesting, and there's a lot of moving parts. Caltrans wanted to step in and say you have to create a turning lane, even though it was already existing business. We're not changing the scope of the business. It's still a fuel mart. They did a traffic study. The traffic study came back and said, okay, never mind, it doesn't warrant a turning lane. But Caltrans came back and said, we still want you to do it. So then we had to go back and do an accident study that went back, I think 15 years. There were only 2 accidents identified in that vicinity. And it was both were fender benders, none had any injuries reported. But those are kind of the interesting things that happen with tribal projects. You know, when it was a mom and pop shop, nobody ever wanted to pass that buck to a private owner. But the minute the tribe's involved, larger agencies step in and think, oh, well, here's easy money and we're going to get this project funded by the tribe. And put it as a requirement. So we're digging our heels in, and we think we'll come out on the top of that. But that's just one of those challenges that I think some entities don't necessarily have to deal with. So this is just a little snippet drawing of what the fuel mart will look like. Definitely trying to keep the tribal feel in our design concepts. It's important to our board, to our corporation, and to tribal council. And I think that that's it. I just have some contact information after that, but that's what I had for today. But if anybody wants to ask any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Sarah. That was informative for me, for sure. I had a couple questions. Does anyone else have any questions? Like
Marianne
okay. Go ahead, Marianne.
Thank you. Sarah, great presentation, just fascinating, and congratulations. I know how hard that work is to piece together. I'm curious about the SSBCI and the work that you're doing there, because it's a very confusing program on many levels. And West is considered an equity advisor in the state's initiative. So the way you were framing it, I was wondering, were you getting that funding directly from the feds, or are you part of that state initiative that's being launched through Cal OSBA? Because that's the lens through which we're doing the technical assistance. And I was just curious to know if you're in the same group that mesh.
Yeah, so we had the opportunity to participate and be part of the cohort that did a group application. I think it's led by Affiliated Tribes of Northwest. So I believe Hoopa jumped in on that application. I think they had 12 or 13. Ross would probably know the number. Susan might know the number too. And I did discuss, we took it to council and asked, because capacity is our biggest challenge with the Alliance CDFI. And so it's like, do we really want to take this on? And I think they were really looking at the big picture in the long run. After that, the life of the program, that money is going to stay in-house. It came directly from Treasury. So, if we had gone into the pool, yeah, we would have had a lot less legwork and administrative responsibilities. However, I'm not sure how that money, I don't know if they've come up with a game plan. They've thrown around a couple different ideas about even starting, a native bank type system with the funding. I don't think that they've come up with a formal game plan for the long run, but our tribal council was confident that we would be able to do just a few larger tribal projects with that money, and we would have the capacity to facilitate that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does a little bit. It sounds like it's a separate group. We're in one of the SSBCI groups that's different from the tribal. And also we're not lenders, we're technical assistance providers. So our job is to work with lenders, and wherever they need help, we can assist in that.
Yeah, so we rural community, the RCAC is also a recipient of SSBCI technical assistance funding. So they're working with us again to provide more workshops, some small business coaching, that kind of thing. And then I have been contacted by Cal Poly Humboldt's North Coast Small Business Development Center. I think that they're trying to develop something similar as well.
Right, yeah, I think we're all, then that was the other thing, the location, and stuff, developing things like that. So, great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'll follow up with more conversation.
And I just want to say, Ross, we'll talk a little bit more about it when it's his turn too, because we're also working with that program.
I was going to say that because we have the slide that has the 10 California tribes that was with ATNI to do what you just described. So that kind of breaks it out a little bit.
Anyone else have any other questions? So my question, I guess, was, first is the YEDC the primary economic development entity for the Iraq nation there on the Klamath?
Yes.
Okay. It just struck me that, like, the dollar volume relative to dollar volumes that get moved around is relatively low. And, like, I'm surprised that, like, it seems like if you could double the amount of money that came in, that could be somewhat transformative. Or, like, what are transformative numbers that would really, give you capacity that would make a change for you?
So the Alliance CDFI, all the funding that I shared was strictly the Alliance. So
Okay.
Yurok Economic Development is for profit, and then the Alliance is nonprofit.
Okay.
So that's why I went after all of the grant funding that I could.
Yeah.
We're not fully supported by YEDC. It's a really weird structure. The tribe just knew that it had so much potential. They wanted somebody to take it over. And I guess when I started there, they felt like I had the capacity to do it. And so it landed with me. We do finally have the funding. We're currently recruiting for an official executive director for the Alliance. And hopefully it will kind of become its own separate thing after that. But yeah, UROC EDC is fully funded by its for-profit businesses in a completely different manner.
Okay, okay.
I
Susan,
was gonna jump in on that too, because I was on the YEDC board when you guys brought the Alliance over, the CDFI, and I told Sarah that this is hard. I mean, that's what we do. We're a CDFI and that's our full-time job. So you were taking on, I don't say it's part-time, but I mean, you're already running all the businesses and now you're picking up the CDFI portion, which is important for the tribe to do it. But it's like, I hope you don't overwork yourself, but that's why it's good to get the executive director on that part, because it's work. Yeah, I'm impressed.
I was going to ask Sarah about the sort of the separation between YEDC and the tribe proper, because a lot of times there's not that separation of decision making for business lending. And so do you have anything to say about that? I think that's an important thing for people to hear.
Yeah, so when YEDC started, they were just a department under the tribal government. It was like social services or forestry or fisheries. And then once the fuel mart was built and it started generating revenue, they recognized, following procurement policies alone that the tribal government had were way too cumbersome. I mean, you just can't do business like that. So they saw the need to have to separate. So they separated, it became its own standalone for-profit entity. They have their own board. Because it was the first corporation of the tribe, they were too nervous to cut ties. So because of our bylaws, we're still required to have 3 council members make up 3 out of our 7 board members on. So there is still very much intertwined happenings, but they are separate. It's a lot easier for council to make the council members that are on our board to make decisions, business decisions, with it being separate from the tribe. So I think that was the mentality, but now that they have multiple, I think there's 7 corporations under the tribe now. With each new one, they're learning, more separation is sometimes better for all. So those ones are structured even differently than we are.
and so are there networks of tribal economic development entities that sort of share best practices and kind of strengthen through a network approach, or like along the North Coast, or I'm kind of looking for a sense of how you work between and together with other tribes to have an impact.
I think there's more of a intertribal relationship on the government side, so than opposed, and not all of the local tribes have separate economic development departments that I'm aware of. Some of them do, certainly, but there's not like a group that really meets together. There are conferences that are targeted to native economic development. And so because it's different, our rules are different than the state and county.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing, there's larger groups. I'm not aware of any local ones that meet regularly.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, and I guess maybe just throw something out here for discussion purposes. I know there's all this energy going around with the offshore wind development, and there's large community benefit agreements and funds that have been, reported anyhow. And I'm wondering how involved the tribes are with accessing those funds.
I know the Yurok tribe has formally opposed the offshore wind projects,
Okay.
and I'm not really comfortable I don't really know the details of anything else, so I would rather not say.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. Yeah, I just thought that, I knew that would be a topic, touchy potentially, but just I'm thinking of sources of funding, and I've seen some big numbers printed out there, and I'm going, geez, it seems like that could do a lot for the budgets that you're working with. But maybe Jason wants to say something about that when he comes out. Sure. So thank you, Sarah, for that really informative conversation and presentation. And I think we'll move right along and hear from Jason.
Okay, fantastic. Well, where do I start? So we don't have a CDFI. Look, you don't see that kind of cooperation between tribes because, look, it's difficult enough just having the resources within the tribe to have an economic development person. I mean, that's the reality of it. And, we saw the same thing in energy. And I had this conversation with the Department of Energy. We sat on the Office of Indian Energy has a group called the Infrastructure and Energy Working Group. We've been voting members for now 10, 15 years. And they said, hey, you were successful in the microgrid. How did you guys do that? What's the secret? Well, the secret was we had enough casino revenue to pay an expert. And for many tribes, that's the barrier. They don't have a person. And after it looks like now there's going to be some funding for that. It's 10 years too late, but that's the kind of challenge that tribal governments have, right? It's a capacity issue, and it's expertise and capacity. And so when I look at it, the challenges are many. So there's really a couple of different ways that economic development happens for us. There's just the traditional go get a loan, right? Go get a loan, get a project, get a loan, try to pay it off. And that works fine in a good economy when you have a good business and you can churn the revenue to do that. And we've used that successfully. I noticed 10, 15 years ago that banks there was a lot less lending. We used to use B of A all the time. They stopped lending in tribal countries on gaming or hospitality related projects. We had Wells Fargo for a while. They don't do much. Then, we were kind of talking earlier before the call about really compact agreements. Those gaming agreements. So in order for us to be able to, they're 20-year agreements, right? So you can build within the first 5-7 years of having that agreement, right? And then you start running into the situation where if you got an economic development project and it looks like it might take you longer than 5-7 years to pay back, now you're starting to get in shaky territory. And there's no guarantee that you'll get another agreement. Right. And so on the other side of the coin, on the tribal governmental side of the coin, tribes can issue bonds. Can't do it for gaming purposes, but you can do it for other infrastructure purposes. But you got to be able to pay them back, right? And it's still tied to gaming. And you got to remember, I can't pledge the land. I don't own it. It's U.S. government land. There's only so many times that you can pledge gaming revenue. Right? How many times can you pledge it? Once, until you pay it off and you move and you do something else. So it's not any secret to me while tribal economic development's tough egg to crack. So go ahead.
Did you say that tribal land is U.S. government land?
This is trust land. I don't own it. Tribe does not own it. Okay. If you look on the map, it says property of the United States of America.
Well,
we don't own our land.
Wow. Okay.
right? Not the trust land. You know, well, there's fee land that tribal members do own, right? But, and it's still under the jurisdiction of the tribe, but what the actual tribe owns is trust land.
I see.
And
Okay.
and it has to be trust land, original reservation if you're gonna do gaming on it. That's another piece. So no new land you can buy, right, without going through a long process. It's not like I could pick my casino up and put it someplace else. I know that's the fear of many in the general public. That's actually very hard to do,
Uh-huh.
right? So, you know, with that, there's really a couple of ways we develop these projects, and you got to piece it together. You piece it together with general fund money that flows from the economics of the economic opportunity or economic endeavors of the tribe, the businesses the tribe owns, whether that's the gas station or the casino or the restaurants, right? And when times are good, you have a little bit of money. When times aren't so good, it's pretty slim, and you have to go and look at other sources of income and figure that piece out. You know, for us, it was you know, the microgrid development was actually a California Energy Commission grant that we backfilled with regular general fund money. And that's been successful. We're in phase 2 of that, and it looks like we have a larger grid resilience and innovation program from the U.S. Department of Energy, where we're doing a 2.0 microgrid, which looks a whole lot like a municipal microgrid. And our piece of that, I think it's going to be a $120 million project. Our piece of that project's like 15 million, 16 million. And it will really prove up the technology so that the UROC, the HOOPA, and the Karuk can do some upgrades on that 1103 circuit and substation that is in disarray up near HOOPA. And they can have their own, you know, they can start working towards energy sovereignty up there with reliable power and don't have to run diesel generators in the summer.
Is that solar or bioenergy, or what is the
It'll be
source?
solar. It'll be solar and battery. And at this point, we've been using Tesla batteries, but we might step out and try other technologies just to try to diversify. But that's also instead of a continuous loop grid, you got to think of it as a controlled loop where you can shut segments of it down. You can disconnect and shut segments of it down just like a regular energy grid. So you can do maintenance or you can shift energy. We'll add battery storage. I mean, that's been my secret here, is that the money we save in PG&E on the large bill, you know, PG&E bill from casino operations, that those saved monies are pledged towards the 2.0. So we kind of do it that way. We got a health clinic coming. That's and I'm talking about these are all projects where they're just grant funded, right? They're grant funded and backstopped. The health clinic will be operational within about 7 or 8 months, and that's been a good project. We have the TAM Resilience Center, and I'll send you links on all of this stuff. That's a $7.8 million EDA funded project that we just broke ground on. And it'll have some business incubation and some job training component. You know, you asked me about offshore wind. We've been neutral on that. But, you know, we're generally in favor of economic opportunity. I think there's questions that need to be answered from our local tribes are asking about that project. I look at it and say, look, it's wind energy, and in our climate crisis, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But we've remained, you know, publicly neutral on it. You talked about the benefits agreement. I think that there's some waiting around there. If I were being honest with you, I would say that BOEM and the federal government could have made this a lot easier by taking that $2 billion about $2 billion that they got on the leases and actually spent a little bit of money in the local tribes to put a person who could get together and do what our energy person would do, or do what our economic development person would do an analysis, report to the tribal government, talk about mitigation, talk about what the threats are, talk about what we should be concerned about. But because they haven't done that, there's a lot of unknowns. And when you have a lot of unknowns, I mean, our history here in economic development, whether it be gold mining, timber, fishing, or marijuana, it isn't so good. It ain't so happy. Didn't turn out so good for us. Right. So, I mean, that's where the fear comes from. And I think that a lot of that could be mitigated if they'd spend a little money up front, to be honest with you.
So can I just follow up a little bit on that? Just
Sure
so is there like any tribal representation and engagement on the offshore wind negotiations that are, and developments that are ongoing, or is it just sort of whenever they invite you somewhere you show up? I mean, is there like a continuous presence on that?
I get invited a lot of places because I haven't been publicly negative. That's the reality of it. But look, I think with the developers, that they're in a place too that they're not really willing to go through the community benefits agreement and really start their work in the community until they kind of see a green light.
Yeah.
And it's been that way kind of with the port development piece too. There's still a lot of unknowns. And those are corporations. When they see unknowns, they see risk.
Right.
They're not gonna go and risk capital on something that's unknown. Although I'm seeing it starting to change a little bit, that attitude a little bit. But I think there's some opportunities there, and I'm hoping that, and I had this conversation when the Secretary of Interior and Secretary of Labor were in town, and we all had an opportunity to speak to them. Where, I just kind of asked them, look, are we going to be able to participate this time in a meaningful way? Or is this going to be, are you just driving the bus over me? Are we get to ride in the bus? Do I get to drive the bus this time? What's this thing look like? Because from the outside, it doesn't look so positive right now.
Yeah.
But there's opportunity there, and there will be opportunity there. But there's a lot of questions that tribes have locally, and I respect their position, and I respect their concern because they're real.
Yeah.
I think there's some work to be done there. So what you guys really want to know is, look, how do tribes, well, let me finish with the grant piece first. Basically what we do is we patch it together. You get a grant from the federal government, we get it from the EDA. It's 7.8, it costs more money. We find some other either philanthropic money, we use general fund money, or we find another grant. I got a health clinic coming. The health clinic will be there, but I got no money for the road right now. I got no money for the sewer or the water, but I got a strategy for that. We'll figure that out. And a lot of it is that way, right? I know in that EDA project, our TAM building, which is the economic development and business incubation, and it's also going to do some other community benefit function, and it'll serve as some training center too for our Office of Emergency Services and general meeting area, and there'll be some. There's also a makerspace lab that's associated with it, and I think I found a way to spend more money on the lab and then transform an old tribal building into actually the workshop area. And there's a whole bunch of nuanced reasons why that's a good idea. But that's the way we piece it together, right? And we got a little tax revenue from the hotel tax and some other various tribal taxes. We try to use that stuff all for infrastructure. We've got a little money from the FCC for high speed, and I got to find engineering money to get it on property and get it dug. And then the last thing is what that I'll say on kind of the grant funded portions is that, you know, we try to do it smart and, you know, try to dig one time. And that's its own challenge, where you try to do water, sewer, you know, electrical infrastructure and telecom, all, you know, in and around the road while the road's open, where the ditches are open. And that can prove to be difficult because, you know, sometimes you're hitting different funding sources for that. And that provides its own challenge. So, I mean, those are the challenges we deal with day to day. You got very little assets. You don't own the property. You can't pledge them. It's hard to get a bank loan. And you still got to just pick yourself up and go figure it out. Where the real opportunity resides, and this has been my belief for a long time, the real opportunity resides in tribal businesses and tribal business structure and our unique tax advantages in and around those businesses. So, you know, tribes can charter their own LLCs. You probably knew that already, but we have a few. It was an LLC called the Saraga LLC that actually built the microgrid. You can still enter into, you know, these instrumentalities of the tribe can have business partners. Probably the most underutilized advantage that tribes have is the Section 17 corporation. Right, and there's some reasons for that. So Section 17 corporations, and I'll send you a link. I'll send you a tribal business structure handbook link. That's the best one written. And I'll send you the link to business structure from Department of Interior. So that Section 17 was born from the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act. And what Congress was trying to do, they were trying to create an even playing field so that tribes could have companies and corporations and be able to compete with regular corporations. So Section 17 is the BLR Economic Development Corporation, I mean. BLR EDC Co. That's the parent. Now you can have instrumentalities or subs companies that are under that parent. And it works as an instrumentality of the tribe, but it's not controlled by the tribal government. It reports to the tribal government, but it's got its own board. It's got its own board and it reports to the tribal government, which makes the tribal government sometimes nervous because you can get into trouble if somebody's cavalier on the board. So we try to pick good people, but we've had that now for 15, 20 years. When it's worked well, it's worked well. Part of the problem with that is not even most people in the federal government know what a Section 17 is. The IRS didn't know exactly what it was when we got into a fight with them over that, right? We got sued in IRS tax court and beat at the IRS in their own tax court. And the judge had a scathing decision on it. Like, don't you know what this is? It's kind of crazy for tribes when they go to form that Section 17 because you figure there'd just be this federal process, but it's kind of different. You write a letter to the Secretary of Interior, right? You write a letter and petition the Secretary of Interior, and you do a few other steps. And then the actual Section 17 can't be dissolved. It can only be dissolved by an act of Congress, right? So once it's there, yeah, I know it's crazy. So, but this is the way that I think that, and we've done this before, and it was very successful. It happened to be in staffing, and we fought the state of California on this Section 17 for years. But the way that it would work is that it's a chartered corporation under the Section 17. It has all the tax advantages of the tribe. The tribe can waive its sovereign immunity in the Section 17 corporation, so it can be so that business partners can go to tribal court or go to state court against the Section 17. So they have, your business partners have some clawback. You can work off reservation and still have all the all the good tax implications as the money comes on reservation. So if you had, say, if you were developing a solar energy company and you were to do a project off reservation with Section 17, not only would you be eligible for the Tribal Energy Loan Program from the DOE, right, or the what is it, the Inflation Reduction Act money, or that your partner would be eligible for those tax credits in the IRA. Although, as an aside, I'll tell you that's been a wacky thing for us too. All the rulemaking, and then they went back and said, "Oh, the tribe can have the tax piece or something." I've got 2 attorneys on it, and I don't understand it, and it's been hardly utilized because of that reason. But it's getting clearer, and I think there'll be a clearer process. You also have to file. The tribe has to file a tax form at the end of the year. So you do the project and you file so you pay for it up front. You file the tax form and then you get the money or the credit back. And for tribes, it's pretty lucrative. But you have to have enough money on the front end to be able to go and do the project. So that's a barrier for most of us. That's why it's not been utilized. I bought a $1 million Tesla battery thinking I could get it reimbursed, and it absolutely meets the criteria. But they took so long in developing the rule, right, that it timed out. You know, so it's like you can't win sometimes. So I'm trying to stay away from that until the rulemaking is solid, and it's been done. But I want somebody else to go carry the water and get one of those done and show me how to do it, because I've already spent too much money and I had my hopes dashed once already. But getting back to that piece, I mean, you'd have a business partner. They would have some capital. You would jointly form the company. You would create the LLC underneath the Section 17. You would do the project. It would create energy. You would sell it through the power purchase agreement. You would already have an agreement where your business partner gets the tax credit, which is pretty lucrative. And, you know, the business is there generating earnings on the power purchase agreement for that however long, you know, 20 years, whatever. And this is exactly what the tribes that I've seen who are successful, that's what they've done. Seneca Nation in New York, they figured it out. And they have some large energy projects and a couple of different sub-instrumentalities of the tribe doing just that. The other thing is that tribal loan guarantee from the U.S. Department of Energy is a good program, and they're dying to give tribes money, and they have a lot of money, and they're dying to make loans, and they're dying to guarantee loans, but you kind of run into some of the same problems. So I think there's a ton of opportunity. You know, I think there's a ton of opportunity for tribes to partner with groups, with local groups, or have business partners. Sometimes sometimes that can be tenuous depending on the business partner, right? And so it's not like there is no risk. And then you run into the problem in many cases that many local jurisdictions don't know what you're doing and they don't understand it. So there's always a legal component there. Unfortunately, it's not like you know, the city or the county is going to understand what you're doing, or even the state to that matter, necessarily. So you're going to have to do some explaining. So what I'll do here, let me see what else I have. I'm going to send you some links right now, send it to everybody. This is the link is it's actually from the IRS website. It's probably the best publication on tribal business structure. And that's the first place I would point a potential business partner to go take a look at. Second link is from from Interior. It also talks about section 17s and talks about advantages and disadvantages. It's a little less detailed, but if you go to the bottom of the document, they also have a choosing the tribal business structure PDF document that they published. If you're wondering about the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the advantages of doing business in energy projects with tribes, there's a guidebook that's the third link. And then lastly, I'll give you the U.S. Department of Energy's loan guarantee program. And you can also search around for some of the other loan programs that they have there. The last thing I was going to say there too is like, look, we've been tremendously successful, but it's been a lot of work. And, you know, we started our EDA project in 2019. And of course, COVID slowed it down and other pieces, but for potential business partners, if it is, depending on the funding source, federal money is not always easy to spend. It's great it's great that you have it. But you know, there can be significant costs just getting through some of the red tape and actually the reporting requirements. And I think there's a push in the federal government, because we keep telling them that they're going to make the IRA a little more user friendly, since they haven't got much money out the door there. And I think that was the lesson for the DOE too, and they're kind of lowering their requirements and trying to make it easier. So I say that because it's getting better, but still there's challenges there.
Thank you for that. I think I saw Layla did raise her hand midway, so make room for that if you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, that was in the olden days. Josh, what was I going to ask?
If you made a note, but not to put you
No.
on the spot.
I got one, whatever the old question was. I do have one. First, I want to say thank you, Jason and Sarah. This is, I heard some of this before, but I think hearing it in this context is it's pretty much a gift and super helpful. And I appreciate that both of you are busy and you didn't have to give this time to this process. One of the things that is top of mind for me, just with my Humboldt Area Foundation hat on, is what is the responsibility and the possible support that a non-tribal community organization can offer to help ensure that public funds are getting leveraged into community organizations, and especially for us tribal organizations, whether they're Section 17s, 8As, LLCs, nonprofits, CDFIs, whatever. And I've got kind of a question that is going to sound naive, and I don't intend it naively. But one of the things that I hear over and over again when I'm having conversations with folks across multiple tribal agencies is warm bodies. For every project, we need more engineers, grant writers, accountants, contract specialists, other kinds of specialists. And I had also heard that word that there were some early conversations about potentially even creating an intertribal Section 17 under the Tribal Chiefs Chairpersons Association, which I think got put on hold for probably a lot of logistical reasons and financial reasons. But I am curious, Sarah and Jason, without putting you on the spot, is there an opportunity for collaboration intertribally to help everybody do some of the laborious and burdensome and expensive back end work that helps draw those dollars in?
I think that we've partnered with other tribes on when it comes time to the actual project stuff, like this GRIP grid innovation and resilience program
Yeah.
monies. We're pretty good at that, but you know that touches our legislative function.
Mhm.
We're good at the government and legislative function. We're not so good at partnering on business stuff, and we don't have much history of that. You know, we're also in the situation, to be honest with you, where our governments were formed for us, right?
Yeah.
It's not the way we traditionally did business. So our constitution is a constitution that was given to us, and it's a model constitution. And then what happened is we operated by receiving monies from the interior, from federal sources, and we did grant writing. And what it did is if you had good grant writers, you did better.
Right.
So they created a built-in competition, right, amongst tribal governments. It was never encouraged that we got together and did things together, which we used to always do.
Mhm.
And then gaming came along, we were able to leverage our sovereignty, right? And we built casinos. And since it's really the only thing you can do that can generate real revenue, now we build casinos and hotels and we compete against each other. And so we always have this conversation,
Right.
the tribal governmental level, like, hey, look, our businesses are going to be in competition, but we're not in competition. And we constantly try to remind ourselves of that. But then we also don't do the appropriate outreach to go and try to figure that out either. So I guess short answer is, look, while we love each other, we're not in some deep economic development relationship. I think, you know, there's a group called NAFOA, right? It's a national group that does a lot of both tax and economic development related tribal project work. And I forget what the acronym is actually for, because I've only really been there one time, but that group's doing a lot of good work and they're encouraging that. I wish there was more courage, you know, that we would do that more often. I think that in the future we might see that. And I think that, you know, these large energy projects that are tribal governmental projects are helping to encourage that piece. But no, the coordinated effort, not there. It is true the Tribal Chairman's Association or Tribal Chairperson Association is moving forward with the Section 17. It's just slow going.
Sure.
And I think we were always wondering whether maybe that should have been a JPA or the Section 17 was a, you know, there's some debate there, but I think we're through that and it's fine. I'm not sure what business we're going to develop with the Chairman's Association, right? What that function might look like, but maybe in a few years that might be something.
Yeah. You know, you're reminding me too, I think I passed this on to Sarah, but I'm happy to find it and forward it to you as well. There's some interesting, there's a collaborative of, I think, 9 Plains States tribes with CDFIs, and they're collaborating on both the fundraising and on lending decision-making, which is pretty cool.
There's some really solid national examples. There's also the Forest Potawatomi out of Oklahoma that have a Native American free trade zone associated with the Tulsa airport.
Oh, right.
And if you Google that, you'll see a few documents that they figured that out. I always thought that was really an exciting piece, and you know, and it's an exciting piece here. I think that most of our available port property is already, and I'll have to go back and check, but it seems like it's already designated as a free trade zone, believe it or not. And if you go to the Harbor District's website, I should do that. So I'm not telling a lie, because I looked this up once before. And you could do it in disadvantaged communities, and I think they've already done that.
Great.
I'll look that up and I'll send you the link.
Good discussion. I think this is just the beginning, hopefully, and we can have more. I know we have the so popular Ross Welch on deck to close out the session. So I have more questions and things to follow up on. I'll save those for a follow on, but Ross, I think the floor is yours.
I've been writing capacious notes, capacious notes about. I'm gonna really shorten this down and kind of dovetail into what Sarah and Jason are talking about, and hopefully they hear a couple things before they run away, because this is sort of linked into what they're doing. Susan, you have the control of the slides, so I'm going to shorten it down a bit. And my quotations notes was to tie into what you've been saying. So here comes the.
I'm coming, I'm working on it, I'm finding it, hold on.
We didn't have enough time to get it ready to put up. So I'll keep it short and interesting.
Short, popular, and interesting.
Yes. As soon as we go. This is the old PowerPoint, right? So if you hit it on the bottom right, down, there we go. AEDC and tribal funding. Today we will talk about, very quickly, experience and lessons, small business lending for tribal members on and off tribal land. And I might go over that really quick. And then tribal initiated community development projects on and off tribal land, and funding opportunities, which dovetails into what Sarah talked about, the SSBCI funding we have for those who are not part of the Yurok tribe, in partnership with ATNI EDC, and then the Native CDFI Network Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, which Yurok is participating in that on their own, and we're also part of that same group that will be able to get this money out to the tribes in our 6-county region. Next slide. So in small business lending, I'm just going to go over this quick, because a lot of times people go, well, how do you do on native lands and stuff like that? So, and we have permission from Victor Knight, who has V&P services. He's up in Hoopa. He has a couple of water service trucks, and he works with everybody, Caltrans, the Forest Service, dam removal. And I just noticed earlier, I didn't realize on our slide that we've used before, that his dog is sticking her tongue out. I'll have to tell Victor about that. But we have a few tools on our toolkit which is not unlike non-tribal loans, with going outside and getting guarantees if we need them for collateral reasons. So we can always, we're a BIA guarantee lender, so we can always use that as well as iBank. So it's, for us, it's nothing out of the ordinary. It's what we do, lending. It's just that there are some more options on for tribal entrepreneurs that we don't have, and like I said, it's the BIA guarantee, though we can also do an iBank guarantee. It's just the BIA is a little bit cheaper and it goes a little bit longer, so we prefer that if we need to do that to shore up any collateral. I'm going to switch to the next slide.
Actually, can I cut in here too, because I have this.
Yeah, I gave her permission to cut in, because
This is lessons learned, and it's actually before Ross's time and my time, but at some point AEDC got a $750,000 loan grant to support businesses. I believe it was in partnership specifically with the Yurok tribe.
It was through USDA set aside for that.
I don't think that the proper established relationships were made when that grant was being sought. Again, it was before any of our times, but I just don't think we can overstate how important it is to make sure that relationships are truly secure and established and valued before people go seeking money on behalf of the tribes or with the tribes. I'm sure there was probably a conversation with the tribe, like, we're gonna apply for this, but I don't think that the real work was done. And so I would just say that as a partner with tribes, to make sure that you're not just walking in and saying, I have a gift for you guys, we're gonna do this big project together, but really making sure that you are truly partners before you even go into projects like that.
So the next.
Okay.
So tribal initiated projects, what has ADC been able to provide to support tribally owned enterprises? This is probably our best example of the different partnerships. This is the Hoopa grocery store. That was actually the grand opening. And that's, I think it is the biggest to date. We got another one online, but that was like 4.2 million. And it's not a grant, it's a loan. But what was different is that we did get the BIA guarantee because it is on tribal land, but we're not that big. We don't have 4.2 million. So what we did is get 2 of the larger CDFIs to participate with us. And touching on what, so there's 3 main partners, $1.4 million apiece. One was RCAC, which Yurok has worked with, as Sarah mentioned, and the other one was Community Visions out of San Francisco. But what's important to know on the CDFIs are their mission lenders. So what does that mean? As a 30-year banker, that means they don't have to get as much interest as possible at all times. Their mission is to help, and both of these are statewide CDFIs. They were thrilled to be part of this badly needed grocery store because when the Rays left, they had a food desert. And so it just checked all the boxes, but we were able to get a rate lower than an outside bank wanted to do. They were gonna make a big deal out of it. I go, what? They're charging that rate? So when you have the right partners, grants are better than loans, but if you can't get grants, lower rate loans and longer terms and better terms are better. And so it really kind of showed off what you can do with the BIA guarantee and mission related lenders. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything on that one. And so our 1.4 million, just to give some credit to HAF and our local headwaters fund, we only had so much money AEDC to put in. So Humboldt Area Foundation stepped up. That's one way they can partner. We've lent out $2 or $3 million over time at one time with Humboldt Area Foundation, and they are considered a mission lender when we use their money because they want this project to happen. So short version. Next page, because I know we have limited time. Sarah brought this up, the Small Business Credit Initiative. We are partnering with ATNI EDC, which is associated, it says affiliated, it's associated, I think it's affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, but I'm not sure. They actually got $21.9 million, and they are working, they have initially 25 different tribes that, as Jason and Sarah pointed out, that don't have a CDFI online in that particular tribe because a lot of them have small finance departments. So what we can do with ATNI is what we're doing in the 9 tribes, which is actually, we could flip to the next slide because it lists, I think it's 10 tribes that are involved with that. Now, Yurok, since they have a CDFI, they're handling their portion themselves. These 10 tribes are utilizing ATNI's services to get the money out. And it comes out in 3 tranches. And when it comes back, it will be credited back to each tribe based on their the amount that they were awarded individually. So it's kind of a neat thing. And we are helping them with on the 10 tribes on our side of the border, because ATNI EDC was actually, up until this, they pretty much focused on Washington, Oregon, Idaho. but they branched out a bit to cover Northern California as well. So it's a neat opportunity, but it's also gonna be a lot of work. But our very first loan that we did is right here, Salmon River Outpost. And talking about partnerships and stuff, it has our money, at-needs money from this SSBCI, and then UROC, Alliance CDFI, put some money in as well. So we're the lead lender on it, but they're all participating in that. And this was actually the very first one of this $21 million grant, the very first loan that they got their money out on. So it was done just a little bit ago. So it was, like I said, the first one, it was kind of satisfying. And also we're trying to use that as a blueprint for the other tribes. And each tribe, that can be whatever it is that they're focusing on. It could be a tribal enterprise or a tribal business. So that will be ongoing. Sorry, I'm doing it fast. Let's fix. So the native CDFI network, they just were awarded $400 million. Sarah talked about this. So there was like 63 CDFIs across the country that are part of this group. We're one of 2 that are non-native CDFIs that are participating in this, because there aren't any other just general CDFIs that could cover our 6-county area. So UROC's, big enough, and then they have Alliance CDFI that they can handle their own. But we will be they'll be able to go through us, any tribe, to tap into this up to $10 million fund that we'll be getting. And we'll also be getting up to $1 million technical assistance, so we can help get this out. It just was announced like 2 weeks ago, so I don't really have all the details, but flip it to the next one, Ms. These are some of the potential loan products that can be used with this money, which is why later on I'll be talking to Jason in the future about scaling this up. So each tribe decides if they want to utilize these funds, what they want to do it for. So you could go anywhere from the usual rooftop solar and battery backup, or it could be individuals or tribal enterprises, which usually is more efficient to get out. So what Jason was talking about, if you were setting up a microgrid with battery backup for a community center in the tribe, or their offices, or or as part of another project, we could get low interest loans out on that. And partly, some of it might be able to be forgiven, but we don't know yet. We haven't actually. It just came out, and they're just kind of writing up the standards on it right now.
And I just want to clarify too, it can be individual businesses. It won't likely be consumer loans, it'll be business loans. So
no, unless
businesses or tribal entities.
Right, unless some tribe says, wait, we really want to do this, and we have a way of overseeing it, then we would talk and figure out how to do that. And there will be some technical assistance available for us. I mean, money to help for us to hire to get this out, but it's still so new. I can't really give the details on it. That is my mega get it done before 5 o'clock. So our emphasis has always been just partnerships and not selling something that we have to sell. It's offering our service to bring in outside money, utilizing the BIA guarantee, or just overseeing a small program. We've done some just helping on our own with other tribal nations on when they need to restart their economic development department a little bit, or just how to do loans. I know it sounds corny, but it's we kind of do our own internal technical assistance, but our main forte is getting outside money to invest in our area. And there's many that want to invest in tribal projects. And we've been just touching on the different outside foundations that are really interested. So if we could put something together that a tribe wants to do, that's very satisfying. It's very helpful.
I'll also add that a lot of our tribal projects that we've worked on, they've been like the first time projects. So, so there's not something, if there's something we've not done yet, it doesn't mean you can't talk to us and we can figure it out. That's kind of what Ross's strength is saying, well, how are we gonna make this work? So.
And that's how we got into BIA lending to begin with, was because of the Carson Block building, which we talked about before. That was a consortium of local tribes own that. And since redevelopment died, to make it attractive for funding, we looked up how to become a BIA lender, and we did it. And that's how it was able to at least get our foot in the door, and then they were able to get their new market tax credits and other stuff. So
I think we can see then how Ross became so popular with his willingness to get in there and roll up his sleeves and try things. So thank you, Ross, for that presentation again. And yeah, this has been very informative for me, that's for sure. I will be consuming the information, thinking about it, and sourcing it out to key people that I think would find it quite interesting. It seems to me that there are opportunities that are not yet on the table. One thing I really did hear was the economic development talent, the capacity across the different tribes, and it seems like that could be an arena for, I mean, that's kind of creates long-term value if you can increase the capacity of your organizations to just engage in this work, because I think, as we've heard today, it takes a long time. We've talked about, even in the working group, these are economic development as a thing is a long lead type of an endeavor. So I'll do what I can to get the message to the right people, and I'll probably be following back up with you, Jason, and Sarah at different points. And I know Vivina keeps sharing us with funding opportunities that she's also sharing out with her tribal network. And I put a link in the chat to this entity that brought to my attention by a national organization that we deal with, a National Association of Economic Development Districts, and they're really focusing in on tribal funding and financing economic development issues. There's one other entity that I'll put in here that may be of interest to you all. If you're not aware of this, firstnations.org Development Institute. But this is an ongoing conversation, and respecting everyone's time, I think we can wrap this up. We will put this on our project webpage, the video for people to see. And yeah, I'd say thank you all very much for making the time to be here. If there's any final comments, I'd look for those. Our next meeting, regular meeting, will be May 15th, and we're going to hear then from, among other things, our friends in Ukiah about how they did their streetscape funding project, or a streetscape remake with tax revenue bonds. So any other comments from the group before we wrap it up? Okay, seeing none here.
I just want to say, this is Vivina. I just want to say thank you to both the presenters for highlighting the historical challenges behind, securing funding for tribes, and just commend you guys and thank you for the good work that you're doing. I really appreciate it. I'm constantly pushing on the other side to change and make some changes there with the application process and all the hurdles there on the state side. So thank you.
Yes, that was helpful. So appreciate you making that part of the story. Thank you. Okay.
All right,
Good
gang.
evening.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys both so much for coming and joining us.
Thank
And
you.
Ross, Q.